Hello everyone and welcome to another video. This time we're going to be reacting to how the Fallout symbol was created by the Cold War and talking about the actual Fallout symbol, IRL, not the Fallout boy. Yeah, without further ado, let's just jump right into it. I have no information about this.
The birth of atomic weapons in 1945 coincided with the start of the Cold War, and the threat of nuclear war has loomed over the planet to varying degrees since that time.
Yep.
And while the destructive power of a nuclear explosion is fearsome in and of itself, the lingering impacts of the byproduct of nuclear war, that is the fallout and ionizing radiation that goes with it, is the truly terrifying aspect to me. It has occurred to me, though, that there's a symbol that's widely recognized in the nuclear community and beyond that I didn't know the history of. So I did a little bit of research. I'm your host David, and today we are going to look at a brief history of the warning symbol for ionizing radiation, the trefoil. This is the Cold War. So, this story starts in 1946 in Berkeley, California at the University of California Radiation Laboratory, but like all things historical, it has roots going much further back in time. While ionizing radiation has always been present in human history, it was only at the end of the 19th century that tools for detecting and identifying it began to be developed. Roentgen and the X-ray come prominently to mind, as does the work of Marie Sklodowska-Curie. It was she who provided the name radioactivity, by the way. Rutherford and Geiger developed a counter to detect and measure amounts of radioactivity in 1908. Cloud chambers and film dosimeters and other measurement methods followed.
Okay, so basically the Geiger counter was named after Hans Geiger. Okay, I didn't know that. The more you know.
But through all of this, while the dangers of radioactivity to the health of those exposed was being recognized, there was not any kind of distinct or uniform signage or method of warning people of the possible presence of ionizing radiation. The Trinity test, conducted in the summer of 1945, had ushered in the atomic age, and interest in all things atomic was on the rise around the world. In a previous video, we've looked at a few of the ways this manifested itself in American culture, but there was also an impact in the fun and exciting world of safety signage. But in all seriousness, it was only in 1946 that the idea of creating a standardized sign to indicate the presence of ionizing radiation really gained some traction.
Well, yeah, because basically after they dropped the bomb and saw the outcome of Fukushima and Nagasaki, yeah, that explains why. When they saw, they're like, okay, let's make sure people don't come through here.
The head of the health chemistry group at UCRL, scientists at the lab were encouraged to come up with ideas for a warning sign. The sign needed to be distinct, but as laid out by Dr. Garden, also, quote, symbolized the degree of hazard, type of activity, but which was simple in design. Of the doodles that members of the lab came up with, as Garden stated in a 1952 interview, quote, the one arousing the most interest was a design which was supposed to represent activity radiating from an atom. The design had 3 areas of an endless, equally spaced around a central circular spot. There is some suggestion that the design represents the 3 most common forms of radiation, alpha, beta, and gamma, radiating from a central atom. It's unclear if this was deliberate in the design or just something that's been retroactively applied in the years after the sign went into use. Now, the design was similar to some signage in use at other labs, but with a distinct color scheme to not be confused with other hazard signage like the red and white combination for fire warnings. That original UCRL sign was designed to be a magenta symbol, Martin Senior Roman Violet.
That's why, okay, yeah, it's better with the black. Who thought this was a good idea? I mean, definitely, it's gonna jump into your sight the moment you spot even an inch of it. But pink, really? I'm not sure I like this idea.
Violet, to be precise, set on a light.
It just doesn't look good. Come on, guys, come on.
Blue background. The idea was that the color blue was in very little use in the lab at that time, so it would be distinct from other signs. Also, the magenta was not only striking, but an expensive color to use in printing, which would reduce its possible use elsewhere. Although Garden favored the blue, others in the lab preferred a more visible yellow background, and signs were made up using both color backgrounds and went into use at UCRL. Then, in 1948, an information meeting was held with representatives from the Multiple Atomic Energy Commission, or AEC, facilities in attendance. One of the key topics of discussion was safety signage and the need to come up with a universal color and symbol to indicate the presence of ionizing radiation. Interestingly, the trefoil symbol was not really a point of discussion, it being generally agreed on. Rather, the color of the signage was the hot topic. Yellow remained the favored color, but no firm agreement was reached. Importantly, though, the United States Public Health Center was chosen, or designated, to be the central point of communication for ongoing discussions related to the signage. While this may not seem significant, this centralization was a key step in ensuring ongoing uniformity and standardization across the more than 500 groups outside of the AEC that were using radioisotopes. That same year, 1948, Bill Ray and George Warlick, who worked at the Oak Ridge Laboratories, traveled to Berkeley to collect examples of the signs being used at UCRL. Upon their return to Oak Ridge, the magenta trefoil design was cut away from the rest of the sign and was tested against a variety of different colored backgrounds. A yellow background was deemed to be the most visible from a distance of 20 feet. The result of this was that, although still unofficial at that point, the trefoil that we recognize today was adopted as the symbol to indicate the potential presence of harmful radiation. It took until the late 1950s for the ASA, the American Standards Association, now ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, to codify the trefoil design as part of ANSI Z35.1 in 1959. And with that said, some of you should still be wondering why it's most often seen with black center and blades and not magenta. That's because when ANSI codified the design, it put magenta as the preferred color, but also allowed for black to be substituted. The trefoil design has gone on to be the internationally recognized symbol for ionizing radiation used around the world. Interestingly, in the year 2000, an International Atomic Energy Agency IAEA study was initiated to explore just how well recognized the symbol actually was.
Very recognized.
This was prompted by several deaths due to radiation exposure in
I believe everyone pretty much knows it. Most people also, I'd probably say pretty much every person knows the symbol, if not the meaning of it. The meaning might escape. It happens, with 21st century, nothing too surprising. But still, if you see that symbol, you'd recognize it without a shadow of a doubt.
various parts of the world. One of the most prominent occurred in Thailand, where a scrap metal dealer found a properly labeled but improperly stored radioactive source head, which, after handling, resulted in his death from radiation poisoning.
Yeah,
the 5-year IAEA study concluded that the symbol had a very low recognition factor in parts of the developing world, as low as 6% in India, Brazil, and Kenya. The results showed that the yellow background was understood to mean caution, but there was nothing inherent to the design that was associated with potential death.
I believe this is more like a damn problem, because if you recognize something being caution, you shouldn't approach it in any way, shape, or form if you don't know what exactly that thing is. I think that's more of a damn problem.
What came from this then was a newly
probably us, probably my country including, but whatever.
Developed sign in 2007 on a red background to indicate danger. It includes the three.
But this is not a bad design either. I kind of like it with the radiation up top, spewing radiation, death, and basically the symbol saying "get the fuck out" as quickly as you can. Yeah, the base that would also be a good replacement.
Blades around the center, as on the 1946 design, but also includes a skull and crossbones, indicating the risk of death. Or pirates, but we're pretty sure the IAEA meant death. This new sign does not replace the 1946 design.
Radiation turns you into pirate and you need to run away.
But rather is meant to be used as an augment on highly contaminated items or areas. Now, while I was digging a little for this episode, I came across several references to the American Civil Defense signage developed for their fallout shelters. In the absence of vault tech to do it for them, the US government did sponsor a civil defense program in the 1950s and into the 1960s, which you can, of course, learn more about from our episode from a few years back on the subject. But when you look at the signage for a US fallout shelter, it bears more than a passing resemblance to the ionizing radiation trefoil. This is in part because the original intent on the part of the US government was to use the same signage. That is correct. The sign used to warn people of the possibility of possibly lethal radiation was initially also going to be used as the signage to indicate where to hide from possibly lethal radiation.
The thing is, the design, it's actually smart. Have the one symbol to represent something dangerous and then reverse it in some way to represent a safe place from that danger. To be honest, I'm kind of on the side of the US on this one. I really like this idea.
So, before 1961, public shelter signage was usually marked with a large letter S, but a specific update was deemed necessary, and the trefoil already in use was considered too confusing. So a graphic design firm, Blair Inc., was contracted to develop ideas for new signage. Blair Inc. developed several proposals to fit the criteria that it, quote, had to be something that would get people's attention and give them direction to the location. The remarkable similarity between the ionizing radiation trefoil and the design put forward by Blair Inc. has often resulted in suggestions that one is merely a derivative copy of the other. But as historian Bill Gearhart points out, the more likely source for the design was the extremely popular and influential design book, Hornung's Handbook of Designs and Devices, first printed in 1932. Triangles were just effective. The points on each of the triangles in the shelter sign each had a unique meaning, something I had never ever heard of before researching for this episode. They were meant to represent 1. Shielding from radiation, 2. Food and water, 3. Trained leadership, 4. Medical supplies and aid, 5. Communications with the outside world, and 6. Radiological monitoring to determine safe areas and time.
I'm not sure that inspires me any of those things besides the first one, but I mean, nah, it doesn't inspire me at all.
The signs went into production with 400,000 aluminum ones produced for use on building exteriors, and 1 million signs made of steel to be used indoors. An overlay sticker was used to point to the direction of the shelter itself, as well as indicate its maximum occupancy. Although the design was approved, some concerns remained even at the top levels of government, including a March 1962 letter from the Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, to the Secretary of Health, Education and Welfare, Abraham Ribicoff, where Mac expressed his concern that the two signs, the ionizing radiation trefoil and the fallout shelter sign, could become confused. Ribicoff's response was to send Mac an example of each sign with a letter that stated, quote, as you can see, the fallout shelter sign is not susceptible to confusion with the AEC sign. This same conclusion has been reached by the Army Corps of Engineers, Dr. L.H. Baker, Human Factors Research Psychologist, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Civil Defense and members of his staff, and others who have inspected these two signs.
He sent him a letter basically saying, you dumb, shut the fuck up.
In other words, Ribicoff told Mac to f off.
Exactly.
Although the National Fallout Shelter System did not last very long as a program, these signs can still be found in the wild, as it were. If you know of some, please feel free to share where they are in the comments so that others might be able to see one. And there you have it, a short history of one of the more iconic images associated to the Cold War. A huge thank you to Bill Gearhart, Conrad adjacent himself, whose work helped immensely with putting this together.
It's been a good video.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss our future work, please make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button after you make sure there isn't a magenta and yellow sign nearby, meaning you are receiving potentially lethal doses of radiation.
I'm playing Fallout, I can deal with it. I just need some pills. So yeah, this has been how the Fallout symbol was created by the Cold War. I really liked it. Especially the end with the letter of the president saying, nah, you're an idiot, shut the fuck up. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you all next time.